Today, we're diving into something big, a huge shift coming to South Africa's retail world. The giant is coming, Walmart. And depending on who you ask, this is either a fantastic promise of progress or a very real threat. We're here to unpack both sides of the coin. So it's official. By the end of 2025, Walmart, the biggest retailer on the planet, is set to open its first branded stores in South Africa. Now, this isn't just about a new grocery store popping up. We're talking about a move that could seriously shake up the country's entire economy. So, what's the deal here, really? Is Walmart's arrival a major win for shoppers, bringing in those lower prices and creating new opportunities? Or is it a looming threat to the local jobs and businesses that form the backbone of the community? That's the central debate. You can really see the two sides of the argument laid out here. On one side, there's this powerful promise of jobs, low prices, and real economic growth. But on the other, there's a serious worry about local stores closing, suppliers getting squeezed, and a flood of imports. To get to the bottom of this, let's hear from both sides. Let's start with why we see this as a massive, undeniable opportunity. For us, this is a clear-cut case for growth and affordability, and we truly believe it's going to benefit every single South African. So why is this such good news? Well, it starts with something everyone understands: your wallet. Families everywhere are feeling the pinch of high food prices. Our everyday low prices mean real money goes back into their pockets, but it's so much more than that. We're talking about creating a wave of new jobs in stores and in logistics, and even opening doors for local suppliers to sell their products all over the world. And on that point about jobs, let's be specific. We're not just talking about vague numbers. We're talking about creating real jobs for cashiers, for store managers, for folks working in our warehouses, and for the truck drivers who keep everything moving. In a country with one of the world's highest unemployment rates, that is absolutely vital. And you can't forget the suppliers. Just imagine South African fruit or wine or textiles making their way onto Walmart shelves across the globe. This is a direct pipeline to a massive international market, something that could absolutely transform small businesses. When you put it all together, the picture is pretty clear. Walmart brings affordability, jobs, and opportunity. Okay, let's turn to the other side of this, because this isn't a simple story of opportunity. This is a serious warning for the local economy. It really forces us to ask, what's the true cost of those low prices? Look, low prices sounds great on the surface, but what's hiding behind that? We have to talk about the very real threat to our own established local retailers, stores like Shoprite and Pick n Pay. And it's not just them. It's about their whole supply chain. The real risk that we could see a net loss of jobs and a dangerous new dependence on cheap imports instead of our own local products. So the end result might not be job creation at all. It could actually be job destruction. And what about the suppliers? Walmart is famous for one thing: pushing supplier prices down to the bone. And how do they get those rock-bottom prices? Often by importing cheap goods. That doesn't help local industry one bit. In fact, it could cripple it. So sure, maybe shoppers get a good deal for a little while. But in the long run, a giant like Walmart could completely weaken South Africa's entire retail ecosystem. What you're left with is less choice and a much more fragile local economy. All right, both sides have laid out their opening arguments pretty clearly. So now we're going to move into the rebuttal round, where they get to challenge each other's points head on. Honestly, the argument against us sounds like a fear of competition, but competition is a good thing. It's healthy. It forces local retailers to step up their game, to innovate, and to deliver better value. When that happens, the consumer always wins.
Hold on. This isn't healthy competition. This is a global behemoth using its sheer size and scale to steamroll local shops. That doesn't spark innovation. It just leads to empty storefronts.
And look, on the supplier issue, yes, our standards are high, but meeting those standards is a ticket to the international stage. It's a chance for South African producers to scale up and go global. That's what growth looks like.
That sounds great in a boardroom, but what about in reality? Those global opportunities only work for the biggest suppliers who can produce massive volumes. The small, family-run producers, they won't stand a chance. They simply can't survive on the razor-thin margins Walmart is famous for.
Let me be clear. We are committed to creating new roles for cashiers, for managers, for drivers in an economy that is desperate for them.
But let's be realistic here. Any jobs Walmart creates won't come close to balancing out the jobs lost when smaller, local retailers are forced to shut their doors. The South African retail market is already packed. Adding a giant like this doesn't add jobs, it just moves them around and likely destroys them in the process.
Okay, we've heard the passionate arguments and some very sharp rebuttals. So where does that leave us? Is Walmart's arrival a blessing or a coming retail storm? Let's quickly break it down in a final summary. All right, let's look at this tale of the tape. When it comes to consumers, the pro-Walmart side says it's a clear win with everyday low prices. The anti-Walmart side calls it a short-term gain that could lead to long-term damage. For local shops, it's either innovate or die, improve or face closure. For suppliers, it's the dream of going global versus the nightmare of being squeezed dry. And finally, on jobs, it's the promise of new roles versus the very real fear of a net job loss. So both sides have made some incredibly compelling points. On one hand, you have the promise of lower prices, new jobs, and a gateway to the world for local suppliers. But on the other hand, you have these very real fears about local businesses being wiped out and a net loss of jobs. So this brings us to the final, crucial question, and it's really for you to think about. Will Walmart's entry be a blessing for South Africa or a retail storm that ultimately hurts more than it helps?